to B&E on DND. I'm Eric, and this is my lovely wife, Brienne. And this is an introductory video. We'll be talking about D&D and our experiences. This is a casual thing, beginner thing, so we're gonna try to explain terminology as we use it, and we're also going to be answering any questions you might have or any topic ideas you'd like to suggest. Send them our way. We'd love to hear from you, and we have ideas on what we're going to talk about, but definitely you could add to it. So I'd like to start off with our very first experiences with D&D. So one is how did you come across D&D? How did you hear about it?
Actual D&D by the name, I think, was probably when I met you, so about 12 years ago. But I was playing D&D-esque games prior to that. I believe it was called Tunnels of Doom on the first Texas Instrument computer, personal computer. We played Tunnels of Doom, or whatever the name of that was, where the characters were pixels. But it was definitely a D&D-esque game. You had fighters, and you had wizards, and you had elves, and such like. But yeah, I think the first real introduction to D&D was with you introducing it to me about 11 years ago. Starting out with 3.0.
So with me, I first heard about Dungeons and Dragons back when I was maybe 12 or so. My Nana had mentioned in passing that local school was doing it, and she thought that was interesting because it was a Catholic school, and she thought it was satanic. So she was like, how are they letting this happen? She was definitely with the mindset that you actually summoned and worshipped the devil and whatnot. But as far as actually starting it was, since I've heard of it, that definitely piqued my interest. I didn't believe any of what my Nana believed in it, but I just thought it'd be fun to try. And my first experience was trying it out in just a bookstore, just a generic bookstore. And the person said to us, I was 16, my brother was 3 years younger, and suggested the original Dungeons and Dragons boxed sets.
So that's the red box.
That's the red box, and that was because he thought Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was, because it says advanced, was obviously too advanced to someone who was 16.
When in fact it was actually just a
newer just new
edition.
Yeah, it was like saying new and improved on a detergent. So oops, excuse me.
Yeah, that's my reminder to drink water. Sorry about that.
So other than that, so we played with a box set, and we thought that was interesting because this goes way back. The box set is totally different from 5th edition now. So an elf was its own class, for example, and
same with dwarf.
Same with dwarf. Dwarf was its own class. Only the human could be the different classes that you find in Dungeons and Dragons: the fighter, cleric, thief, magic user. So that was my first experience with box set. So how about you in the store?
The first store I went into when it was somewhere between 8 and 12. I basically described a D&D thing that I wanted a game where I would roll dice so that some degree of randomization was involved, that the dice would dictate what I did, and that's what I wanted. I really couldn't describe it any better than that. They did have the trays full of the D20s and the D8s and the D4s, and they looked so interesting, and I asked what those dice were for, and they told me that they were just for a different kind of game. And basically I was sort of shooed out, that there was no game that I wanted that existed. But I basically described Dungeons and Dragons. I just didn't know of that name. And then later when we were together and we went to a store that sold minis and dice, because gotta look at minis and dice, right? It was actually one of those weird experiences where I walked in and literally the entire store stopped and stared at me. I was the only woman there. And even if I'd ask a question, all responses were completely directed at Eric. Yeah. So that was very off-putting and very strange. And that was just, as I said, like 10 years ago. So you would have thought that it would be a little bit better than that. But nope. So that was my first store. Those were my two store experiences. We never went back to that first store because we don't like patronizing places that actively disrespect.
No. And my first, besides playing with my brother in the box set, my experiences were first with a group was when I was maybe a year older or so, and part of that required a lot of convincing because my mom was going under my Nana's, explanation that it was satanic and whatnot. So before we could play with this group I was invited to, the Dungeon Master had to call and talk to my mom and kind of explain, no, they don't actually summon anything. It's not a worship service of Satan and whatnot. That it's like playing a fantasy video game kind of thing.
Or a board game.
Or board game.
Minus the board.
Minus the board.
Yeah.
And that you just have some pizza, you have a good time, and he was able to charm her to allow me to play with my first group of friends. And other than that, my first experience was dying a lot. So I had a lot of DMs from my brother to this person where you rolled, of course, for your hit points, which determines how well you survive damage. And when you run out, you die. And so I would roll, and I'd get 1 or 2 hit points to start off with almost every time I made a character. So the average die roll when you start out is a d6 from basic weapons, and an average dice roll would be a 3. So that meant on an average roll, my character would always die. So that was very,
You couldn't even get to level 2 or 3 to get more hit points.
Yeah, getting to second level was huge. I just would hate it because the point that I would roll another 1. So yeah, that'd be the main thing.
Hit point of a cat or a rat.
Yeah.
They have like a half, but yeah.
But it was interesting because it was a cosmopolitan area in California, the Bay Area. There were different races. Men and women were playing. And I didn't think anything of it, and we had a great time doing Dungeons and Dragons. And what was your experience actually D&Ding?
The first couple of times were really frustrating because I read through the player's handbook. I sort of did an initial skim, and then I tried to read it over again a little bit more intensely, which is just how I try to learn things. I do a brief overview and then I try to focus on it. This is Hawk.
This is Hawk. Hi, Hawk.
But since I was the only player and my husband was the DM, I was creating a party of 4.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never really felt like I was really learning how to play any of the classes because I was playing 4 at once and I was the only one there, so I couldn't bounce ideas off of anyone. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel like I was it was hard for me to learn how to play being a solo player.
Yeah.
For me. But it was still fun. It was just this overrunning frustration of knowing I wasn't picking it up as fast as I wanted to. But other than that, it was fun. I love the rolling of dice to see how you do on things. Even though on a D20 I will almost only roll 1 through 10. It's still fun. So that was great. And as we got more materials, as we got more minis, as we got more tools to draw maps and things, that got even more fun because it just added a little bit more furniture to the theater of the mind, as it were. So that was really nice. It's nice. It's fun. I do wish there were a lot more female minis, and I wish there were more minis for dwarves and elves and halflings and gnomes, especially gnomes and halflings.
Yeah.
Jeez.
We went on a spree from when we first started. I tried to buy minis, and you love gnomes, halflings, and I love dwarves. So we just went on a spending rampage.
Basically, if we
of
could find a
those.
mini.
Yeah.
There was a dwarf or a halfling, and we were even using that interchangeably with gnomes. We were just buying them, and still they're.
Yeah, I think I found about maybe 10 or so dwarves.
There's more dwarves now, though.
There's more dwarves now, though, but of those dwarves, maybe 1 or 2 were actually like women dwarves.
Yeah.
And same with elves and halflings. Most of them
Especially
were
the halflings.
male.
I think I've only got like 2 halfling female characters.
Yeah.
And their proportions are a little creative. But yeah, it would be nice. Someday it would be really cool to have a 3D printer and make our own minis, but that's a whole nother thing.
So that's it for our introductions. So we'd love to hear from you. Please comment and give us some any questions or topic ideas you'd like us to talk about. And so I think it's down there or so. Please subscribe. We'll try to do this weekly or so, depending upon life. And click like. We really love to hear from you, and click a like and share and subscribe and all that good stuff. So
And be polite.
be polite, please. I love you very much.
Happy
and
gaming.
Happy gaming.